I'm David Tennant, and this is How Roald Dahl Shaped Pop.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the chocolate room.
Roald Dahl was the first children's author to achieve pop star status in Britain. During the 1980s, he became a regular on kids' TV, where he got as fanatical a reception as the bands he appeared alongside.
Depeche Mode will be in the store all morning, call them. And James and the Giant Peach author Roald Dahl will be here to tell us about his latest book, Revolting Rhyme.
It was a decade in which he scored hit after hit, The Witches, Matilda and the BFG to name but a few. These weren't your typical children's stories. They were anarchic, outrageous and subversive. Some would say, just like rock and roll.
The good thing about Roald Dahl is the fact that, not everything's nice.
He never tamed his imagination, and I think that's rebellion in itself.
There didn't seem to be any boundaries, there was nothing that was taboo.
He really wrote in the spirit of rock and roll, actually.
What a rock star.
But Dahl is more than just a kindred spirit. He's an influence too. 20 years after his death, this is a new tale of the unexpected. The stamp he's left on the world of pop.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination.
Come with me to hear the music and musicians inspired by Roald Dahl. Those whose songwriting has been influenced by his storytelling style.
Songs like Same Size Feet on our first record were probably a nod to him. Definitely songs like Stop to Fill My Car Up.
Little Red off my first record was Roald Dahl inspired.
There was specific reference in a song called If You're Feeling Sinister to a Mike TV in the Chocolate Factory.
Those whose creative juices have been stirred by his vivid, fantastical tales.
What struck me was the magic, and the feeling of wanting to conjure magic is something that's really stuck with me.
And those who've turned his stories into song for films and musicals. One of those tracks, an ode to Willy Wonka, even gave a Rat Packer his only US #1. Come with me to hear How Roald Dahl Shaped Pop.
When Roald Dahl's got you in his grip, there's nothing quite like it.
Everybody ready? Come on then, here we go. Roald Dahl's children's books tend to have a recipe which makes them utterly delicious to kids. First off, there's a conceit that is totally outlandish. Say, a giant magical peach full of talking insects. Then there's a good dollop of rudeness and a sprinkle of gobble-funk, Dahl's invented language. Words such as whiz-poppers and snozwangers are guaranteed to get a giggle. But usually, the most important ingredient of all is that the child is the hero of the tale. Often they're poor, orphaned, misunderstood or badly treated, which only makes their victories taste even sweeter.
I feel very strongly about children who are in sad or desperate situations, but I think more importantly, from a writer's point of view, is that it's a classic and unalterable fact that the more you can start a child off in a rotten situation, the more wonderful it is when he becomes a hero or finds a treasure or anything,
Dahl has a particular dislike for violent, vindictive adults, born out of his experiences as a child. He never forgot the brutal canings dished out by his school teachers. However, his own childhood also taught him the joy of something that crops up again and again in his books: revenge. At the age of 7, Roald and his friends decided to get their own back on the vile and loathsome owner of their local sweet shop in Cardiff. Fed up of the way Mrs. Pratchett treated them, they took a dead mouse into her store. When she wasn't looking, they dropped it into a jar of gobstoppers and waited. George exacts a similar revenge on his selfish, cantankerous grandmother in Kate Nash's favourite Roald Dahl story, George's Marvellous Medicine.
The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth, showing disgusting pale brown teeth. "Here we go," George cried out. "Swallow it down." He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Owie!" and her whole body shot up, whoosh, into the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jack-in-a-box, and she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in mid-air, about 2 feet up, still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, the eyes bulging, the hair standing straight up on end. George's Marvellous Medicine was one of my favourite Roald Dahl stories. I love that book. It's just the words of like everything that he's putting in the potion, and like, I don't know, you just feel like you're almost eating it as well. You feel like you can taste everything that he's writing about. The shaving soap, the hair remover, the dandruff cure, the automatic washing machine powder, the flea powder for dogs, the shoe polish, the black pepper, the horseradish sauce, and all the rest of them. It's really great to have books like that to read, to stir it up inside of you and make you want to like come up with these crazy ideas. The way I like to write stories and invent characters, I think that's come from Roald Dahl, really. And I think a lot of my songs are about just telling stories. When you're a kid, sometimes you can feel a little bit insignificant and you feel like you're never taken seriously. And in Roald Dahl books, like, the kids always like the main role, and they're always really smart and important as well. That really inspired one of the songs on my first record called Mariella, about a girl who decides that she doesn't want to speak to anyone anymore because she just doesn't really feel like she fits in, and she wants to be more mysterious. She feels like a little bit of a lost soul even though she's only 7, and she like sticks her lips together. She like glues her lips together.
Sometimes I wish I was like Mariella. She got some Pritt stick and she glued her lips together.
That's a really sick, dark thing to do, like glue your lips together. I think that's what I like about Roald Dahl. His stuff as well was really sick and twisted.
People used to say she's as quiet as a mouse, she just doesn't make a peep. She marched to her wardrobe and she threw away the colour, because wearing black looks mysterious, but it didn't impress her mother.
Her mum's like, please, you have to have your friends around, and like, I want you to wear all these like pretty pink and flowers and colours, and she's like, I'm only gonna wear black from now on. And like, her teachers are like, oh, she's only going through a phase, it'll pass. But she knows that even though everyone's underestimating her because she's a kid, she knows how serious she is about it, and she's so determined that she's never gonna ever unglue her lips from being together, because she doesn't need anyone, and she can think with herself and she can play with herself.
At school, Mariella didn't have many friends, yeah. The girls, they all looked at her and they thought she was quite strange. She said, I'd never, ever, 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 ever. Yeah, I'm never, ever, 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 ever. Gonna unglue my lips from beating together. Ha, 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 ha.
I think his stories can really stir my mind as well. It makes me want to come up with little places and stuff that don't really exist and invent characters that do really weird things that are kind of surreal and almost magical in a way. I kind of think that Little Red as well, which is off my first record, was kind of Roald Dahl inspired. It's about like an invented town and this character, Little Red.
Made a little town out of stones and out of wood, and they made a little king out of plasticine.
If there's a feel of Dahl to Little Red, it's because the song takes you to an eerie other world, a fantastical town overseen by a king made of plasticine. Dahl tends to pluck his characters out of reality, whisking them and you to a place of wonder and fantasy.
You do take the child out of their own life. In the very beginning, you must do, and start them off in a world that they haven't quite ever seen. If you start them off in their own cosy living room and their dad and mum sitting around and all that, it's no good.
When Roald Dahl's got you in his grip, there's nothing quite like it.
Alex James of Blur.
It sort of carries you away. It does feel like we're just being taken off at breakneck speed into these strange worlds of his imagining.
Just take the BFG. The giant snatches Sophie from her bedroom window, grasps her in his hand and gallops through thick forests and rushing rivers to a great yellow wasteland where trees stand dead like skeletons. In this desolate place lies a hidden cave, the BFG's home, which is jam-packed with jars full of good dreams. Natasha Khan, better known as Bat for Lashes, takes you to Dahl-esque worlds of awe and mystery in many of her songs.
Got woken in the night by mystic golden light, my head soaked in river water.
I'd read George's Marvellous Medicine at night time with a torch under my duvet, and I just remember being so excited about this giant cauldron of crazy medicine he was making. And so began months of experimentation in the bathroom, and I would pour different thicknesses of shampoo and different colours of toothpaste into Tic Tac boxes and make these bizarre horror pieces. Roald Dahl, he seemed like a grandfather I always wanted, that could tell me these really amazing stories that felt relevant. And I remember reading The Witches and just looking, every time I went out or to go to the sweet shop or anything, me and my friends would look for women with gloves on and see if we could guess whether they had real hair or not. And I think what struck me was the magic and the feeling of wanting to conjure magic and to tell stories and to weave a world of illusion and imagination and dreams is something that's really stuck with me.
Horse night with dances in the dark.
We can all understand the need to escape, feeling lonely or rejected or dreaming of some better place that you can go to. I identify with a lot of his stories because I feel like home was quite a sad place sometimes, and I think for a lot of people growing up can be full of difficulties and feelings of isolation, and to dive into books like me under my duvet with my torch and the witches or whatever, it creates like a home, a place where you feel understood. And I feel like my way of doing it is to tell stories with journeys in them, to use symbolism and characters and landscapes and magical faraway places, because as a child I was obsessed with magical faraway places.
Daniel, when I first saw you, I knew that you had a flame in your heart, and under wild blue sky, marble movie sky.
Creating my first album was a very kind of new and exciting experience, and it was very much rooted in childhood and telling stories. And having sort of been through the promotional rigmarole for the last 5 years, I feel like I was coming to a point where I was starting to forget those magical places and kind of shutting down and being tired and not letting my imagination run free. And just today, sitting on the train and reading James and the Giant Peach again, I felt really inspired, because I just look at him and I think he was much older than I am, and he retained that spirit of childhood and freedom. And so I think he's influencing me perhaps now more than he ever did. It's really good to have him back.
Although Dahl achieved greatest success in the 80s when Natasha Khan was growing up, his biggest hit was actually published in Britain many years previously, 1967 to be exact. And if ever a book was of its time, it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies.
1967 was the summer of love. The charts were awash with psychedelic pop songs, and the Chocolate Factory read like one of them. Both the Beatles and Roald Dahl took us on river trips through bizarre but delicious worlds. A steamy mist was rising up now from the great warm chocolate river, and out of the mist there appeared suddenly a most fantastic pink boat. And then, "This is my private yacht," cried Mr. Wonka, beaming with pleasure. "I made her by hollowing out an enormous boiled sweet. Isn't she beautiful? See how she comes cutting through the river?" The gleaming pink boiled sweet boat glided up to the riverbank. 100 Oompa Loompas rested on their oars and stared up at the visitors. What made, and continues to make, the book so irresistible to kids is its central storyline. It's simply every child's fantasy. Charlie Bucket starts out with nothing. His family are so poor they're starving. Yet he ends up with the ultimate prize. Willy Wonka hands him the chocolate factory itself. He has as many everlasting gobstoppers, rainbow drops and luminous lollies as he could ever desire. Blur's Alex James was enthralled by it.
I was about 9 when I found Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in the classroom library, and I read it because of the title. And as soon as I finished reading it, I started reading it again and again and again. I got quite obsessive about it, and when I discovered there was another one called Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, God, I still remember that sort of feeling of my heart leaping, like that there was more to this world. I still think that's his most perfect work. It's about the most perfect thing anyone's ever done. It's up there with Sgt. Pepper and tomato ketchup.
Stuart Murdoch of Belle and Sebastian felt similarly.
The very best one was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, no question. As a kid, first 60 pages were my favourite things ever written down, just because of the possibilities of this person who had nothing suddenly having everything, being this one human picked out for glory. And of course you always rooted for him and hoped it would be you, and you knew what was going to happen every time you read those 60 pages, but the pleasure was no less. And then after that it went into the factory, and that was a great adventure, just the whole magic of discovery. There was one specific reference in our songs from a song called If You're Feeling Sinister. The character is a very sad character, is going through all sorts of ponderings about religion and the meaning of life and whether it's all worth it. The last verse he or she decides to cheer up and decides to rent a television and a video, and fantasizes about being on television and how that would surely make life worthwhile for some reason. And so she imagines that she's in a million pieces, which is a direct, not so much steal, but a reference to Mike TV in the Chocolate Factory.
Like the character in Stuart's song, Mike TV is obsessed with television. His mind begins to race when he witnesses Willy Wonka's enormous camera turn a giant chocolate bar into a million pieces, which are then sent to a TV screen. "And what about people?" asked Mike TV. "Could you send a real live person from one place to another in the same way?" "A person?" cried Mr. Wonka. "Are you off your rocker? But could it be done? Good heavens, child, I really don't know. I suppose it could. Yes, I'm pretty sure it could. Of course it could. I wouldn't like to risk it, though. It might have some very nasty results." But Mike TV was already off and running. The moment he heard Mr. Wonka saying, "I'm pretty sure it could, of course it could," he turned away and started running as fast as he could towards the other end of the room where the great camera was standing. "Look at me," he shouted as he ran. "I'm going to be the first person in the world to be sent by television." "No, no, no, no," cried Mr. Wonka. "Mike," screamed Mrs. TV, "stop, come back. You'll be turned into a million tiny pieces." Here's If You're Feeling Sinister.
All right, I'll give it a go. When she got back, her spirituality was thrown into confusion. So she got a special deal on renting from the man at Rediffusion. Look at me, I'm on TV, it makes up for the shortcomings of being poor. Now I'm in a million pieces, picked up for deliberation by the people listening at home, by the people watching on the telly, by the people listening at home, by the people watching on the telly. But if you